Hello, and welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have two incredible guests, Neill Marshall and Kurt Mosley. Neill Marshall is an executive search veteran with more than 30 years of experience. He has been involved in more than 600 senior level assignments. And in 2017, Neill was part of a co-founding firm of HealthSearch Partners and currently serves as the board chair. Kurt Mosley is also a highly esteemed healthcare industry expert with over 30 years of experience. He is also the association's practice leader for HealthSearch Partners. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome Neill Marshall and Kurt Mosley.
Courtney, thank you for being here. We are positively overjoyed to be here.
Yes.
Thank you so much for you both coming on to the podcast. And I'm so excited today to really take a deep dive into leadership, some lessons that have been learned along the way. And Kurt, I know you have a background in baseball, so
Yes.
we'll certainly spend some time just on the power of sport and all the lessons that we could take from sport into our professional career. So I first wanted to start it off just opening up for either of you to begin with an introduction or a background of yourself.
Sure. And I'll start if you don't mind. Yeah. And as you said, Neill Marshall, my background is been doing executive search for over 30 years, most of it focused on the hospital and health system space. Together, we've interviewed, I don't know, 10,000 hospital executives. And what we started looking at was really developed a deeper interest on why some leaders thrive and then others kind of struggle after they've been hired. And that led us to this first 90 days leadership. And I'll tell you a very quick story on how it started. We were interviewing a guy by the name of Richard Parks. He is a longtime hospital executive. And he said, when I took it, he was running a big hospital in West Texas, 22 hospitals. I mean, huge system. And he said, well, Neill, when I took the job, when I take a new position, my wife stays home, gets the kids ready, sells the house, and I move into the hospital. And Kurt and I looked at each other and I said, yes, Richard, everybody works hard their first 90 days. He said, no, I move into the hospital for 90 days. Most big hospitals, like Tallahassee Memorial, has a dorm set up so that the residents can sleep. And he moved in and he told us stories about that. And literally, it fascinated us so much. We wrote an article about it and then started kind of on this first 90 days journey because of that.
That is incredible. And, I can't wait to really dive into that because it really is, I feel like for high achievers especially, but being fully immersed in that new role, learning as much as possible. But then also what comes up on this podcast a lot is this idea of work-life harmony. I've heard work-life integration. I've heard so many different terms. So thank you so much for that introduction. And Kurt, we would love to hear from you. Introduction and a background.
Sure. My name is Kurt Mosley. I'm the association practice leader, as you mentioned. I've been in healthcare for over 35 years, starting a long time ago in physician recruitment, and then about 5 years ago transitioned with HealthSearch Partners. During that time, my career, I've been a national speaker on a lot of different healthcare topics, all related to healthcare, poverty, its effects on healthcare, physician and leadership burnout, the future of healthcare, the rise of convenient care, and all those issues that we deal with every day. And my role with the firm is to maintain, work on searches, but also maintain our state hospital endorsements. We have 5 state hospital associations that endorse us, and we're very proud of that. It's based on our business and our track record and our ability to succeed in placing leaders in both large and small hospitals across America.
Thank you so much, Kurt, for that introduction. And as you both have mentioned, I mean, just extensive years as far as the experience in healthcare. And so my question for both of you, just want to open up the floor, but what kind of inspired or influenced you to go into healthcare?
I'll answer first if that's okay. Courtney, I got to be honest. I wasn't drawn into healthcare. I was drawn to a position that happened to be in healthcare. And once I was in, I loved it. And the longer you stay in a certain segment of business, the more people you know, the more relationships you have, and you stay. And I actually, when I joined the firm for the very first time in healthcare, it was a 2-line advertisement in something they call a newspaper, in a place that they used to run things called classified ads. It was a 2-line classified ad, and Courtney, I don't know why, but it spoke to me, and I have no idea why. I answered it, got the job, and the rest is history.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that's what's so interesting about how we get into certain fields or different industries. Sometimes it's a conversation that just sparks inspiration to go in that direction, or sometimes it's simply opportunity. And then before you know it, it's the networking, meeting others. And then you maintain just the joy of being in that industry. So thank you so much. And Kurt?
Sure. I first of all, out of college, I started in retail, and I worked in it for 17 or 18 years. And I was talking to my grandmother, and my mom had been in healthcare. She worked at a place or a facility called City of Hope in Southern California, a catastrophic cancer center. And I got to know doctors through her. And my grandmother, one day I said, I need to make a career change. And this was 35 years ago. And she said, well, I know you like to make money, and we all do. But she said, let me tell you something. She goes, money is honey, but health is wealth. And she said, look into healthcare. And that was my grandmother's kind of foray. And I talked to my mom, and she said, well, then that's when I got into physician recruitment, because I knew a lot of her doctors through my friends of my mother that worked with out of City of Hope. And we got to be friends. And over the years, many people have said to me, well, how long have you practiced medicine? Well, I never practice medicine, but I had to learn what a doctor was to be able to recruit them. And that's how I got into the industry.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you so much, Kurt, for just elaborating on the journey and all of the experience as you look back. Like, how did you start? What was your why? Like, what really excited you to get into healthcare? So thank you so much for that, Kurt. And Kurt, I have to also ask you an additional question that really pulls in. This podcast is about life lessons, sport experiences, and career experiences. And so when I was doing some research, I saw that baseball was a large part of your life. And as we know, sport is so incredibly powerful as far as the lessons it could teach us that we could, of course, take on with us into our professional career. So I would love for you just to maybe, if it's 3 lessons that you took from baseball and just kind of expanding on the power of sport.
Well, and we talked about it earlier, being a national speaker. Somebody said, how did you get into speaking from baseball? Because that seems like a big jump. And I said, well, they're very similar, because I played left field, and it's a very stressful position. You could win or lose a game in left field. And I said, it's like public speaking. I said, you're in front of a lot of people, and we were big stadiums. Again, pressure was on you, just like public speaking. And just like in public speaking, if they disagree with you, they throw a lot of things at you. Sometimes in the stands, they would throw it at you. And also they talk a lot about you and your family members, the way they talk to you. So I said, it's very similar. But I think what I took away from baseball is the preparation creates confidence, because you have to be confident. I think that's a key factor. And teams really, I learned early on, teams outperform talented individuals. People always said, oh, we have some hot shot coming up from, junior college or some, high school all-star. But I found from that consistency really beats occasional brilliance in baseball. And I think great coaches focus on fundamentals, and that's what our 90-day series is about. We had one of the biggest quotes I always use was John Wooden. He was an NCAA Hall of Fame coach with UCLA, and he said, "Be quick, but don't hurry." And I learned that in baseball because there's so many times you have to make a decision, and you have to. What we always used to say: act quickly to learn, but move deliberately to change. And we say that in our 90-day series. But think before you make your move, because so many times you see people. Why did they throw to that base, or why did they take? Why did they try to steal that base, or whatever? But those are the stories I get from baseball. Baseball is a very good situation that really translates into leadership.
No, that's fantastic. And I love how you mention preparation. When opportunity calls, are you ready? So I love how you mention preparation. And, Neill, I want to transition over now. What's so interesting, you mentioned your 90-day program. But also, just to take it back a little bit further, you had co-founded HealthSearch Partners in 2017. And so I'm curious what the actual gap at that particular time, the gap in the market that you all desired to fill.
Yeah. There were a couple of things. We had all worked at big firms, and there's a thing in the big firms, in search in general, and it's called off limits. So, for example, if I'm doing a search for Tallahassee Memorial, or have done a search for Tallahassee Memorial, I can't take any of their people. And the larger you are, the bigger your off limits issues became. So we all broke off of big firms and started our own firm um, in order to be able to limit the off limits and increase our candidate access, our candidate pool. The other part, in a big firm, I always got in trouble, Courtney, because I was always doing something different, something new, something. I mean, I remember back when newspapers were something. USA Today interviewed myself and another partner, and they took my quote, and it was on the front page of the USA Today, which was in those days astounding, right? Well, guess what? I got in trouble. The CEO's assistant called me and said the CEO was mad that he didn't get the front page of the USA Today. So I was always getting in trouble. I felt like that if I were leading, at least then, if I were getting in trouble, it would be for things that I truly did versus trying to make things better. And the last reason is so that when we saw things that were different. So, for example, we realized that hiring the leader is only half the battle. It's only half the job. The other half is helping them be successful, and couldn't do that in a big firm. But in a firm that I'm leading, um, uh, am able to make those changes and do those things. And one other thing I wanted to say, look, Courtney, I'm a failed athlete. I was horrible. I could, like Michael Jordan, I couldn't make my high school team, but and, but didn't make any other teams after that. But I had a daughter, still do. But when she was 12 years old, she said, "Dad, I want to play volleyball." And I said, "Sweetheart, it just so happened I knew that in our town, the volleyball players that were 12, 13, and 14 were winning national championships on a club level." And I said, "You will never be able to play in high school." And she said, "I am going to quit dance and I'm going to play volleyball." And I said, "Well, then we need to find somebody that will help you." And I met a woman, Ruth Nelson, who former Division I, LSU, University of Houston, University of Iowa, that was private coaching. And the minute I met her, I knew she was the one. And my daughter started working out with her. And from 12 years old, she couldn't make the fifth team of the number one club team in Dallas and Fort Worth. When they were announcing the fifth team, we snuck out the back way. It was so humiliating. By the time she was a junior in high school, they came up to her and said, because they were playing for the state championship, they said, "You don't even have to try out. We're going to put you on the number one team if you want to play."
Are you serious?
And I equate it to, number one, having the help of the relationship with Ruth and helping her. And second, she had to work so much harder than everybody else. For example, she was offered one Division I scholarship to Oregon State University. Went there her freshman year, was an All-American. She was runner-up for National Freshman of the Year. By the end of her freshman year, every single team in the country won it because she had to work harder than everybody else. That's my
Gives you
sports
chills,
story.
doesn't it? Gives you chills, doesn't it?
It gives me chills because, thank you so much for sharing that, Neil, because, as you were speaking, the power of passion, and when somebody has that drive and determination to really go for their dreams, I think, and like you said, when it's met with that support system, those who are willing to help along the way, you never forget those people. So thank you so much, Neil, for that. I really do. I get chills when I hear these stories in sport, because you know that those individuals now are able to take those lessons with them as they move forward. And that's so powerful. You have to be a very proud father.
Of course.
You can tell.
It's actually funner than when they do it, when your kids do it, than when you do it, frankly.
That's amazing. And so my next question, and I'm going to open this up to either of you to answer, but I think what's really interesting is emerging technologies, AI, in various industries, various fields. And so particularly, of course, as we speak about healthcare, can you all elaborate on what you're seeing right now as far as even the transformation currently with emerging technologies and AI, or even if you look into the future, say 5-10 years, what you are predicting as far as preparation for those individuals to desire to go into healthcare?
Well, that's a good question, Courtney. I mean, AI is ever present in healthcare. It started with, health information records years ago. It was, we went from, doctors writing things on charts, because I'll never forget a young doctor was talking to this older doctor about making everything paperless in the office. And the older doctor was holding his charts, and he said, I appreciate your passion, but he said the office is going to be paperless when the restroom's paperless. So he wasn't getting the AI, but AI is getting into healthcare. It's going to improve information. It's going to help decision support. I think it's helping doctors right away. It's diagnosing. IBM's Blue actually diagnosed a cancer patient in Japan that they had spent 2 years trying to figure it out in about 60 or so minutes. It's not going to replace trust, judgment, or leadership. And I always say with AI, you have to be artificial intelligence also requires emotional intelligence. And I hope we don't forget that. I think that's key. And leaders are going to have to interpret information quicker and faster. And AI is going to help that, because in healthcare, the margins are so tight, so small with everything going on. The decisions have to be accurate, right, and on the money. And the human connection even becomes more valuable, because people start to say, well, I'll let ChatGPT do it or anything, but you still have to go back, look at it, make sure it's part of you. I use ChatGPT. I'm not going to say I don't, but I always say, in my words, this is not my words. And I think it's very important. We had one of our 90-day stories, Thurman Troutman. He said he used a no spreadsheets philosophy. He said he used technology to free leaders to spend more time leading people. And he said, I don't really go with the org charts. He goes, I drop down a couple levels and eliminate those. So there's a lot of people out there that understand AI is out there, but they don't forget the old school way of dealing with people and leadership and establishing trust. So, every major technology wave increased the value of these leaders, but at the same time, you have to be adaptable.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Kurt. And, I like how you really emphasize emotional intelligence and those soft skills. I feel like even in education, with students, the preparation, not only for, of course, the degree that they're getting, but these life skills, the ability to build relationships, the ability, like you were speaking about, just being able to communicate effectively, the span of different generations in the workplace, I think is really interesting right now, because the technology, when was technology introduced, if you will. Like, I'm a millennial. Social media came much later, certainly did not grow up with it. But how these generations, they're very different in the use of technology, let alone, of course, like you mentioned, once you get into a particular industry. So thank you so much for that, Kurt. And Neill, I'll open up to you if you'd like to respond to that question as well with AI and emerging technologies.
Yeah. People ask me, well, what role AI is going to play, and frankly, Courtney, I don't know. It's so vast and so immense. I know that it is because you talk about you being a millennial. I'm a baby boom. I'm the last of the baby boomers. Um, but when I would go in and interview CEOs back in the early '90s, and their assistants would come in having printed off their emails and hand them to them, right? And they would read them and then tell the secretary or assistant what they wanted to respond to. And I remember doing a search for a CEO, and the system was going to go through and buy a new IT system. And I thought, well, listen, and I talked to the board and I said, you really need somebody who's extremely facile in technology. They don't have to do it, but they have to understand. They can't be the person who prints out their emails, because you're fixing to spend $100 million, which was a lot of money back in those days, on technology, and you better get it right. And if you have a CEO who doesn't understand that, you're going to be you're going to be hurting. Now, I think things have changed because even the baby boomers today, a lot of them are they have iPhones, and that causes you to be technologically facile because there's so many things so I think we're moving out of that. But what is going to happen, man? I don't know.
It's so true. And I'm so happy that you mentioned that, because I really do. I feel like we're kind of entering this kind of time where we've never seen before. We don't know how it's going to look like moving forward, and there is uncertainty. But I also think too, you all were mentioning just the word adaptability, and I think the ability to be able to adapt that much quicker, I think, is really going to provide an individual a competitive advantage, let alone, of course, an organization or hospital in this case. So thank you so much for responding just to emerging technologies and AI, which, of course, is at very forefront at many different discussions. So, Kurt, you mentioned that you do a lot of public speaking, and I'm really curious about why you're holding on to that. Like, is there a particular message that you really do want to get across current day?
Well, just like our 90-day series, Courtney, I'm a storyteller, and I've been I've been fortunate enough to speak in all 50 states in the Union and Puerto Rico. Well, so during my career and during that time, I just like sharing lessons that I learned from thousands. People always said, you have so much information, but I've learned it from somebody else, and I like to pass it on and share it. I like to help organizations avoid common mistakes, especially with the 90-day series. We see so many people go in, try to change things at day one, and that's what we're trying to avoid. And I like helping leaders shorten their career curves, making them more effective quicker, because they have to be with everything. And then seeing others succeed because of one idea. I was doing a speech to a group of doctors, and we were talking about patient satisfaction surveys. And I had a quote that I thought was cute, but I said, I wrote a blog one time on patient satisfaction survey. It was called "I Can't Get No Patient Satisfaction," to the Rolling Stones song. And everybody said, you're the guy that told me that one time. And so it was just that he came back up to me years later and remembered me for that. But our entire first 90 days was really was created so leaders could learn from others' experience. And that's what I share in my speaking. So I try to get that out there. Then it avoids them repeating mistakes other leaders have made. So
No, that's fantastic. And I really do. I want to spend some time. I'm going to open it up to Neill to really take a deep dive into this 90-day series and how individuals could get involved in it. Is it particular levels? Is it as far as even roles? And what will the individual ultimately achieve by just involving themselves in this series?
Well, I truly don't believe that it is level specific. We talk a lot about CEOs and executive leadership because those are the people that we deal with day in and day out. But the reality is that everybody can learn lessons from the 90-day series and learn how to go in and uh, and structure because when you're making the first times that you are in a position in an organization with people, it's so important to be intentional about what you're doing, to know the aura that you want to present. I'll give you an example. And it was actually my first job, right? This is like 1984. I was an executive trainee with an organization, and there were 5 of us, and we were meat eaters. I mean, we were like fighting each other to succeed. We were in this executive training program together, and they fired our CEO. So a new CEO was showing up the next day, and all of us were looking out the window, and he drove into the parking lot. His name's Grover Martin. He got out of his car and he walked the parking lot and he picked up garbage. And he walked into the warehouse, threw the garbage away, never said a word about the garbage. Came in, introduced himself, got it right, all this. Well, that's what we call a symbolic act. Grover was showing us that business as usual wasn't anymore, but he didn't preach. He didn't scream. He didn't yell. He just showed us that things were going to be different. And I will tell you that that's the last day that Grover Martin ever picked up a piece of garbage, because all of us showed up 15 minutes early and we walked the parking lot every single day. And there was never a speck of garbage. There was never anything wrong in the parking lot, because he showed us that this was the way it was going to be. And it was the first time I had ever seen a symbolic act. And frankly, I didn't even know it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But during the study of this 90 days, I was walking my dog one day and it all of a sudden hit me. Grover Martin, I saw somebody do a symbolic act. And so we wrote an article about it.
I think that's a powerful, powerful lesson for anybody. And Kurt, I'm really curious. We've been talking obviously about like leadership lessons, but what is maybe some just general career advice? Like if it's one piece of advice or just over your career that you could really like help others with.
Well, as I said earlier, I don't meant to be repetitive, but be quick, but don't hurry. I've used that a lot, especially listening before you act. I think that's very important. Understand before changing. Understand the problem before changing it. Understanding the culture before trying to change the culture, and then don't forget you have to earn that right and trust to change that culture, and earned authority before exercising it. And then another one is just, it's a visual to me, but just to make, my father said it to me one time and I took it to heart, but he said, remember this in life. And he said, I'm going to give you some pearls of wisdom. I thought it was going to be money or something like that. But he said to me, he said, Kurt, it's hard to talk your way out of something you behave yourself into. So leaders always ask me, remember that. And I always say, remember, you're on stage on day one. They're watching you. They're not expecting you to make the right decision every time, but they're looking at you. They're watching your behavior, and make sure the audio matches the visual.
That's really powerful. And I think what's interesting about what you're speaking about too is even the presence in the actual organization, but then also too with social media as well. I could only imagine, and I'm sure you all could probably speak to this, but social media platforms could really expand upon who we are as people. And yes, in some capacity, if it's LinkedIn, obviously it's more business related, but then also too, people do look into Instagram accounts, so maybe more just general life as well. And so, has there ever been an experience where you are able to actually see more of a person through social media, especially through recruitment, search recruitment?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Many of the executives, and if I could back up a second, Courtney, Neill hit on this, and he said all levels can learn from this. And I want to add on that this is not just healthcare specific. This is leadership in general across all the board. But just that this is the industry we're in. But we've had CEOs that we counseled to start through our 90-day program series about, again, going back to you're on stage, but they're usually in smaller communities. They're usually a number one employer. People are going to know them. They're going to be out in the schools, the churches. They're going to be out in public. And like a lot of times social media can support that. They can say, here's the CEO at our local rodeo, or here's at the county fair. But at the same time, you have to watch. You really have to watch what you do because you're on stage all the time. Neill?
Yeah, one of the things that is really has become incredibly important, Courtney. So when I started in the business, because hospitals were kind of disjointed, they were everywhere. If a CEO stubbed any employee, but let's just say CEO stubbed their toe somewhere, they got fired. That whatever happened, right? It was written about in the local newspaper, and then it went away. Okay. Today, you have to be so careful of everything you do and again, because we only do healthcare, I'm going to use a healthcare example. But if a CEO stubs their toe, the doctors vote no confidence against the CEO, the board fires them. It's not just in the local paper. There's a organization called Becker's Healthcare that is a news conglomerator in the healthcare industry. They will pick up that article, they put it on their website, and then they send out 15 emails a day for the next 30 to 40 days that will talk about that. I call it the Becker's bomb. It's a nuclear bomb that literally everybody in the country knows. I had one where a CEO went and interviewed. He was a current sitting CEO. He went and interviewed in another place, and they published the finalist in the local newspaper, but it got on the web before he got back to his original place. Everybody in the organization knew that he interviewed there, and the board was waiting for him in his office. You just have to be so careful in everything you do.
As far as what you're saying, I can't even imagine, as obviously like an experienced seasoned professional, but at the same time, how this could maybe affect those who are entering into their professional career, the ability to calculated risk taking for innovation. Because if I make a mistake, I mean, later on, obviously in that particular case, but that it would be amplified all over the internet, heaven forbid if I do make a mistake and it doesn't pan out as like successful. But what do you think that, I don't know, for those just entering into the workforce, maybe some advice to really hold on to that sense of creativity, exploration, into innovation at large?
Especially if you're younger, you're not going to be in a position where you can that your creativity is going to be too stifled, because even if you fail, it's going to be at a lower and lesser level. But I will say, I do think it's important. One of the things that I've got 3 children ranging from like 31 to 28 or 32 to 20, anyway, late 20s, early 30s. And I started talking to them when they were in grade school. And I just said, don't ever let anybody take a picture of you that you wouldn't want your father, me, to see. And the bigger picture of all of that is don't ever do anything that you don't want your priest or your preacher or your grandmother or anybody that you feel strongly about that you wouldn't want them to see. And don't say those things either in social media. You don't have to tell if you want to have a good career, have a good career, but you're going to have to temper yourself and be very careful, because I will tell you, we don't do a search today without doing extensive social media checks. And frankly, if something bad pops up, we're on it and we'll know about it. And this stuff doesn't go away. It's there forever.
Yeah, and in today's media, whatever you want to call it, I guess our age of information, if you do a good job, Courtney, it gets around. If you do a bad job or you do something wrong, it travels at light speed, and you can't catch it once it's out. You can't catch it. You can't put the horses back in the.
Thank you both for just that that advice, as far as even from your position and for executive recruitment as well. Because I think social media is so powerful in the capacity of both sides. It could be very powerful to amplify something very positive, but on the flip side of the coin, if you do make a mistake and it's something negative, that could also unfortunately be amplified. And I think what Neill was even saying, but even the way that you carry yourself and in public, somebody could be recording at any time. And it's not to say to be paranoid the rest of your life, but I will say that is something that is different than when I was even growing up. You didn't have to watch your back all the time in that respect. So I think it's a different world we live in, but I think it's all about just that sense of awareness, being self-aware of where you're at, and just how you carry yourself out in like the public arena. So thank you both.
And people say that somebody who speaks their truth and talk and is very vocal about, well, you know what? You don't always have to speak your truth. Okay. You don't always, and I mean, all you have to do is look on YouTube and type in Karen to find people who are speaking their truth and end up losing their job and having their career wrecked because they were jerks. Well, don't be a jerk. Don't be a jerk. If you got to tell somebody, go into your house, tell your spouse, listen, I'm going to tell you something weird, and tell them, okay? They're not going to, but you don't have to be out there yelling and doing crazy stuff.
I completely agree, and I think that's another skill in my opinion. And I would be curious from your standpoint, with obviously your extensive experience in recruitment, but how things have changed from the organizational standpoint, or like hospital systems, when there is a need for layoffs of any sorts. And you could see videos later on, just got fired and all this. So I'm just curious about what you're actually seeing, and what type of advice you could offer when, sometimes necessary business moves do have to be made in organizations.
Be thoughtful. Be thoughtful, right? I guess the word that everybody uses today is tone deaf, right? Somebody says something and they are tone deaf. Well, whenever you're making decisions, I mean, really delve into it. Make sure that you're doing the right thing, and then do it the right way. Now, does that mean everybody's going to be happy? No, they're not. But if you are really, really thoughtful, and if you have somebody on your team that's screaming, don't do this because this might, think about that. Think about that.
I had a friend of mine that used to work for the company that I used to work with. And he called me about a month ago, and he had on LinkedIn, he had a plaque that he received from the company being the employee of the year. And he was laid off, and he was holding it up saying, everything he had done, but he was laid off. And I said, first of all, take that down. Second of all, I said, I get it. It's tough. But he said, what's your advice? And I said, you can't wear the black armband forever. You got to move on. And in healthcare, because of all the advancements in AI, jobs are being eliminated. There's no two ways about it. And in all industries, let me say that. So you gotta take the good with the bad and be thoughtful. You're upset. We get it, but you got to move on. And the more you concentrate on the past, your future is lost.
That's so true. And I think even honestly, drawing back to even sport, that was something that was an excellent lesson of when you do make a mistake, when you fall down physically in the sport of gymnastics, what do? You get right back up again. And I think, those lessons that we learn along the way are very transferable, especially in this present day where social media does. It presents like a new environment, a new landscape of how we maneuver ourselves, how organizations maneuver themselves as well. And so I would love for you both, I'm going to open it up to either of you. But when it comes to just valuable lessons with like working with people along your journey, is there anything in particular? And it could be more present day with different, changing environments, but something that you have learned as far as even you could offer advice working with people.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. First, everybody wants to be heard. And really today, everybody expects to be heard. And if they're not being heard, they're going to find somebody that they can be heard by. The other thing I think is people support what they help create. So I'll tell you a quick story. One of our articles was a gentleman by the name of Jay Robinson. He runs a region for Kaiser out in California. He has 2 hospitals, and he when he started as CEO there, he went and interviewed and met with all 242 of the leaders of his organization. 242. The 2 things that he did that I thought were so important. Number one, he went to them. He didn't have his assistant call them up to his office. He went to them. So that was one. The second thing is as he was interviewing and meeting with these people, he asked them, if things are better in 90 days, what has changed? What have we done? What has been accomplished? And then he took all those and found the ones that bubbled up to the top, that were the ones that a lot of people were espousing, and that was his marching orders for the first 90 days, and people supported it because they helped create it.
It reminds me just big picture of always being open to different perspectives in life. And that could be in career, that could be obviously at higher level as far as roles go, but always keeping an open mind as to maybe even sometimes blind spots that you're so fixated and so narrow focused that you could maybe miss other perspectives. So thank you so much for that, Neill. And then Kurt, if you would like to add to that.
Sure. I think one I guess valuable lesson, I think respect travels faster than authority does. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, and I think also listening is the highest form of leadership that I've dealt with. And through this 90-day series, Courtney, the most successful leaders spend more time asking questions than giving answers or coming up with answers.
Absolutely. And Kurt, I do have to mention when I first started out in my pharmaceutical sales career, that was something that was so difficult to do because I came out of training, 2 weeks, give or take, and I was so excited to share all the knowledge, all the 2 weeks of knowledge to the physicians. And, I think those valuable lessons early on, and like you said, I mean, the importance today listening, because as Neill was mentioning, it's true. Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to be seen. And when we could just slow down and actually just take in, especially those who have the experience, who have lived the experience, and to take in all of that wisdom, because also too, you could learn along the way from someone else's journey. So Thank you both for that. And, just for the last question, if you will, I just wanted to open it up to just health search partners in general. Is there anything new or perhaps just expanding upon this 90-day series?
Yeah. So, what we've done is we focused. The first step was focusing on tactics that people were using, and then talking and writing about those tactics that people are using. The second step is kind of coming up, and we're in the process of doing this kind of a step-by-step plan, and we're working with people on how to build out your first 90 days in a step-by-step plan. We'll be writing articles over this whole year about that. And then we're also developing an AI enhanced tool that executives will be able to use when they start a new position, that will lay out exactly what to do, how to do it, when to do it, that will offer feedback and things like that.
Excellent. And just to clarify, I know obviously you're in the healthcare space, but does that pertain to a variety of different industries? Can it expand across industries or
I think
specifically?
eventually it will. We're going to focus
Okay.
on because our people are healthcare people, but I think eventually, yeah, I think that there's no reason why we can't make it industry agnostic. We have to learn the other industries, right? We know healthcare, so it's very easy for us, but then we'll have to learn. But yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Neil and Kurt.
Well, I'd just like to say in the many CEO interviews that we've conducted, the leaders that succeed in that first 90 days, they do really three things right, I think. They listen, they learn, and they also build trust before they try to change anything. And I think that's really important. And if we have any healthcare leaders or any leaders listening onto the podcast today, and they have a symbolic act or a story that they utilize in their first 90 days, we'd love to hear from you and interview them and add them to our series, because that's how we learn and that's how we tell our stories.
That is absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. And I really do. I think just that idea that the higher that you climb, there's always something to learn. Especially today with, like I said, just rapidly changing environments. The information is out there, but I think it's also just understanding, connecting the dots. And there's more and more information it seems every day. So to
Sure.
keep up with it.
Well, and Courtney, there's a great book, and you reminded me of it. It's called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it's by Marshall Goldsmith. And it's about people that say, now I'm the CEO or I'm at the top, but the book's about what got you there. You may have to change what you've got in the new position. It's a great book. It's a great read for any of the leaders on that are listening in.
Yeah, this is not something that we discovered. It's just a reality is that, listen, the information is out there for you to be able to do anything, right? But it's taking the information and then actually implementing it. And that's the delta that we're trying to close, right? It's not only taking the information and learning the information, but then actually doing those things and doing them consistently every single day. You talk about sports and what you learn from sports. What I learned was my son was a shooter, right? And he was a great shooter. And you know why he was a great shooter? Because starting when he was 8 and 9 years old, he was shooting 500 shots a day, every single day.
So true. I like that repetition, that idea that you could always be learning more. Books, I know just, Kurt was saying too, I like an actual book. I have a book here. I like handheld books, but really even expanding your knowledge outside of different industries. I'm currently more so in sport management, more academia, but learning even about healthcare. I have many individuals out on LinkedIn just to understand and keeping up with trends. And that leads me into my last question with healthcare in particular. But where do you all see healthcare going, maybe say 5-10 years down the road? Is there any particular trends that you're slowly starting to see catch on?
I'm not sure, Courtney. Um, it's the Tallahassee memorials of the world don't exist anymore. Okay. And what I mean by that is the solo, standalone, not for profit, they just don't. So the organizations are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It used to be that a substantive healthcare system was $1 billion, and today you have $100 billion organizations and $150 billion organizations, and so I think they're going to continue to get bigger. Not really sure why, but it's probably it centers kind of around the Walmart. I call it the Walmartization of the world, which means there's no such thing as a mom and pop grocery store anymore, or a mom and pop dry goods store. Walmart came in, and all of those went away. And it's the same thing in healthcare.
Healthcare is the number one employer in America. About 5-6 years ago, it eclipsed, retail. $5.2 trillion now in healthcare spending in America. And sadly, as we get older as a country, we have more people 60 and older now than we do 17 and younger. And those people, I'm one of them. We're both, I'm a tail end baby boomer, but we punch above our weight. We're accessing healthcare. So it has to continue to grow to take care of us. And we're living longer. We have more people in America, more centenarians than any other country in the world. You wouldn't think that, because everybody talks about how, unhealthy we are. But healthcare is going to have to continue to grow to accommodate those people and be more efficient, because there's going to be so many more of them entering when they turn 65 and get on Medicare, then, the floodgates open. So it's going to have to do that, but it's going to have to gain efficiencies. There's going to have to be more streamlined approaches, and patients have to be, doctors always tell me this, but their best patients are the most educated patients. Patients have to learn what's best for them.
That's so interesting, because I was just just a quick follow up there. But with when pharmaceutical companies were able to advertise like for the first time and stuff, and then you see the individual or the patient, of course, going into the office, and I always thought about that. What doctors actually did they like that? Did they like the fact, hey, I heard this. Am I a good candidate for this? So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I remember my daughter played volleyball in high school, and she was on social media and hurt her knee. And I went to the orthopedic surgeon with her, and she goes, "Well, I have a left patella injury. It's ingrown, and the protocol says this, 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 and this." And this was 15 years ago. And the doctor said, "Where did you learn this, young lady?" She goes, "The internet." So again, doctors. That's why AI is going to be very important to doctors, because you have educated patients, and again, America needs educated patients to know what's best for them. Neill?
Yeah, I'm going to take a little bit different tact, and I'm going to tack to the left a little bit and say, we're talking to as you talk about young people today, right? I remember when I started my career, frankly, I thought my career was going to be 20 to 30 years. To me, 30 years was like a lifetime. But I would say that if I'm a young person today, their career could be 50 years. And so what that means is, you look at it like it's going to be 50 years, because it may be. And so do the things early that are going to keep benefiting you all the way through.
That's excellent advice. So thank you both for that. And we always love to end with a positive message or a positive quote for our community. So I'll open it up to Kurt to start us off.
Sure. Well, with everything industry out there, people say, COVID is coming back in some areas, but I always like to end my speeches with this one quote. I always say, let's all be positive, but test negative. Okay.
I like that, Kurt. Thank you so much for that. And Neill?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the 90 days. And as you're starting a new position, the first 90 days aren't about proving how smart you are. They're about proving that you care enough to listen. And I think that if you do that, you'll go far.
power of listening. Neill and Kurt, thank you so much for coming on the Plenty of Positivity podcast and sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom. Truly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Courtney. We had a positive experience.
Thanks for having us.